going to Wednesday night services all the time, or saying the right thing, or doing the Eucharist, or doing your hands the right way, or walking the right way, has nothing, I promise you, nothing to do with any of that. It's your relationship with Christ, period. It's just like it's talking to your Heavenly Father. You just talk one-on-one with your best friend. He will listen to you, and he will guide you if you allow him to do that, because he wants the best for you. Even though you don't understand a lot of things, trust me, I don't understand a lot of things. But when I trust him, we lost you twice that night. Said we brought you back twice. I said, oh wow, so I died twice, I got brought back twice? She goes, yes.
I want to start in the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a town in southeast Arkansas called Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Born and raised right there.
And how big a place is that?
Well, when I was growing up, it was about 60,000. It's down to like 45,000 right now. But it's not like a huge town, but for Arkansas, it was actually considered one of the bigger towns in Arkansas. So 60,000 folks, that was quite a bit then.
So, did you grow up in a normal home, mom and dad, sister and brother?
I grew up, yes, mom and dad were good folks. Of course, I grew up with one sister. She's older than I am. So, being born when we were in the generation we were born, we were latchkey kids, so to speak, what they call that generation. So, my sister and I relied a lot on each other. So, and even today, my sister and I love being around each other. We enjoy talking with each other. Dad was had very much kept us in the faith, and mom and dad both. And I mean, they were some good folks, some good backgrounds, families too.
Mm-hmm. So did you went through graduate high school in Arkansas?
Graduated from Pine Bluff High School, yes sir, in '91.
And what were your interests? What did you want to do with the rest of your life at that point? Did you have any idea?
Well, I always loved music because I grew up in music. I grew up doing music in church, obviously. I did any kind of singing. I did played. I did dramas. Anything to do with any kind of music, any kind of playing, singing, I did. I was part of outreaches, the whole 9 yards. I mean, church life was a big part of my life, and I grew up like that. And I couldn't think of anything better, because I loved it, because I loved the folks I was around, loved the folks I was with. And as far as what I wanted to do with life, I wanted to do something with music. I actually went to a one-year college at University of Central Arkansas in Conway for 1 year for music, but they put me in classes on teaching music, and I'm like, teaching music's not really what I want to do. I want to perform music. So I'm like, after 1 year, I'm like, okay, I'm going to quit and try to see if there's something else that I do. So, pardon me. After the 1 year, I started working on just regular jobs. And I was like, you know, I would continue to do music at church, so I was still involved with church a lot.
Okay, so how did you transition into working as a musician? How did that work for you when you started out?
Well, I'd gotten married. I had gotten married to my first wife in '98.
Okay.
And we moved down to my grandparents' old house, and we lived, which is out in the country, which I loved, missed very dearly, and so it just so happens I actually got contacted by a quartet group out of South Arkansas called the Kinsmen. They said, hey, we heard about you, we heard good things about you, because I had gone to a buddy of mine had a recording studio in Whitehall, nearby area town near Pine Bluff. He heard me. He goes, and he talked to them because they were apparently all friends. They all knew each other. He said, so we heard from Mark about you, and we wanted to kind of see if you might be interested in this, because we do sing quartet music, and that's kind of how I got more involved in doing professional music stuff. I didn't play, but I sang tenor with the quartet, and of course they got a live band, and we traveled. We did quite a bit with that group. We went a couple of places as far as went down to Monroe, Louisiana. Went to a lot of churches there in South Arkansas, and I think they're still going today. In fact, with a whole new group. But that's kind of how I got more involved with on the professional side doing music.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the divorce with my first wife, which happened in '02, was when we were, I moved up to I moved up to Branson. I got contacted by my uncle on my mom's side. So he contacted me. He lived in Ozark, Missouri. He said, "Hey, Lance, I know you love music. I know you love playing music. I know you love singing. I know you're pretty good at it." He said, "So I know, it just so happens I know some some theater owners here in Branson. Thought you might want to try out to see if this might be for you." And so it just so happens in August of that year, '01, by mid-August, I went up there to visit with him, and I went to go try out at one of the theaters in Branson. And when I talked to the general manager after I tried out for them, he goes, "Hey, Lance, can you be up here September 2nd?" So I had 2 weeks to basically pack up and get up there to Branson, find a place, to live and all that. And I had 2 kids in tow at the time. So I got, like I said, I tried out. I got up there to Branson, got into my place up there, a condo that my parents helped a lot. My parents have been a big help in all my entire life. They helped me find a place up there, get me started, get me relocated, and get up into the condo, had the kids' rooms, all that stuff. And I started working for White House Theater in Branson was my first gig. And I started singing. They hired me for singing my voice. So I did that, but as I began to do the shows, I also got into, because I knew how to play. I knew I played piano in church. I played drums in church, so I did those things. And the theater found out about that, and they started implementing me into being a drummer and a piano player in a couple of their other shows. So I would do that once a week, and so I began to be able to progress better as a musician, overall musician, in playing as well as singing. So, and the fact at that time in Branson, over at a place called BT Bones, every Sunday night was like what they call a jam night. It was, they had all sorts of customers inside, and of course you'd play, they had live music, but a lot of musicians in Branson would go there Sunday nights, and that way they could play the music that they wanted to play, not what the theater or the frontline singers said they wanted to play or sing. So we got to do that ourselves, and they had their own drum set there. They had a piano there. A lot of guitar players brought their own guitars, brought their sax or whatever they were playing, at the theater, and we'd play songs we wanted to play, which we had a good time doing, because we were making some pretty good money per month for that big a family. And I thought, I'm sitting here, I just thought, hey, I'm on top of the world. I'm living out in the country like I want to. I don't have to worry about in-town stuff all the time. I'm not gonna be out in the woods, raise my kids out in the woods, have them go outside, playing all the time. Just enjoyed where I was at, the house we were in, and what we were doing overall. So I enjoyed it. And of course, there came a fateful day we were going to look, she and I were going to look at a business to lease, a building to lease, and we were going to lease that and open up our own business under our name, our LLC name, and do a coffee shop, a resale shop there. And of course, it was in Kimberly City, which was near us. So we lived north of Branson, just a little bit out in the country. I mean, 86 acres. I mean, out in the middle of nowhere. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And so she and I were going to we were going to lease that building, and we were going to open up our own business. And we went to go visit with him. He said, he gave us the paperwork for it. He said, I tell you what, you check out this lease and pray about it. He says, and if you guys want to go ahead and do it, he said, we'll come back in the morning and you guys can sign it and we'll just go forward with the lease. I said, okay, sounds good to me, actually. So on our way home that afternoon, early evening, we were traveling back home one of the back roads to go back to where we lived. And she and I turned onto one of the roads to go back to where our house is at, to take the road down. Excuse me. She stopped and she looked at me and says, Lance, I don't know why, but we need to go ahead and put our seatbelts on, because we never rode with our seatbelts on. I said, okay, not a problem. We can just go ahead and do that. And it just so happens, just a few miles down the road, I was coming out of a turn. A lot of this information I had to get from the police reports and from other first-hand individuals, because I do not remember a lot of this. But I was coming out of the turn. The young lady in her Jeep Liberty was coming into the turn, crossed the middle line, and hit my car head on. And at that point, she actually cut his, I think, a couple of times, because she hit the driver's side door and spun it, hit the driver's side door, but hit the front of the car, then hit the back of the vehicle and knocked us into a tree. And from what I understand, the car caught fire at that point under the hood. So, and it just so happens that 4 or 5 people were there that saw the accident. So they got out of their vehicles to come see if we needed help. And as there was fire starting under where the engine's at, they pulled her out. They were going to get me out, but they had to pull me out the passenger side, because my door was so dented in they couldn't open it. But my window was down, it had been broken, and so they got to me and they couldn't pull me out till they cut my seatbelt off me. And the lady I talked to was there. She said, "And Lance, your foot was stuck under the car, because the front had been pushed in some." Said, "Your foot, and you lost your shoe." He said, "We couldn't get your shoe." I went, "Well, dadgummit, why couldn't I get my shoe?" So I lost one of my shoes, which is whatever. But she said the fire was going, and we were afraid you were going to burn to death. So her and 3 other men pulled me outside of the passenger side of the vehicle and got me laid down, and said I was breathing funny, that I was out, I was not even conscious. And so when she was on the phone with 911, had officers showing up, had ambulance showing up. They were going to life flight me up to Springfield to the hospital. It's called Mercy's now. It was St. John's, I think, at the time. It's now called Mercy. And she said, "You were breathing funny," and she was on the phone with 911, and the officers were on the way, and she said, "There's something funny." She said, "There's something funny with him because he's breathing funny." So when the ambulance got there, the firefighters all got there, they put out the fire on the car. The front of the car was all burned to crisp, and so the fire got extinguished out. They loaded me onto an ambulance and were able to get me up to Springfield, because the life flight, they couldn't land the chopper because of the weather. So I was like, okay. But they let, ambulance for her and me both. They put a guy in ambulance and got us up to Mercy in Springfield. And then that's where there's a couple of stories that I have what happened up there that I learned later after this accident that happened with me. 2 years after my accident, I was selling things on Facebook Marketplace. Had a, had a young lady come and get some things for her and her husband, pick up things in the truck, and she was loading a couple of things. She looked at me, real funny. She goes, and she pointed her finger at me. She goes, "I know you." I said, "Well, yeah, you just bought this stuff from me, and I'm helping you load it up. My name's Lance." She goes, "No, Lance, I know you. You were in an accident 2 years ago." I said, "Well, how do you know that?" She goes, "I'm one of the nurses in the ER the night they brought you and your wife in." She goes, "The hospital didn't tell you, but I will tell you, we lost you twice that night. Said we brought you back twice." I said, "Oh, wow, so I died twice, I got brought back twice?" She goes, "Yes." So, and you were hooked up to all sorts of machines because of the accident that happened. I had what they call, the doctor said I had specifically what they call a DAI injury. It's called a diffuse axiom injury. Basically what happens is when you're jarred around like that in your vehicle, your brain just bounces around in your cranium, and it can cause bleeds and bruises and bleeds and things. So I had 2 brain bleeds, so they had to drill a hole in the side of my head, and I think one in the back, to relieve the pressure, and had to put sensors in there to keep an eye on the brain itself. Of course, a lot of this stuff I learned out from the doctor and some of the medical professionals there. So, but they had me, like I said, I was actually in a coma. They had me a medical induced coma for 2 weeks. So I was in a coma for 2 weeks, was in the hospital for 2 months. I had to start after I finally consciously knew where I was at. Because from what I understand, when I talked to my mom and dad, my mom has pictures of me. I mean, I've got some pictures. She's got some extra pictures where she's got me up doing physical therapy. She remembers that, with the parallel bars that I'm walking on, and walking with, having me walk on. And so she said, we could kind of tell by looking in your face you were there, but you weren't there. I said, to be honest with you, I don't remember a thing. I said, the first thing I remember consciously doing was, I remember a lady coming and shaking me and go, "Mr. Taylor, it's time for breakfast." I'm waking up going, I recognized where I was at because I've been in hospital rooms before. I was like, and I said, "Well, wow, what's going on?" I said, I understand I'm in a hospital room. I said, "Why am I here?" Began to ask her questions. She goes, "Mr. Taylor, we can answer your questions. If you grab your wheelchair, you come on down to the nurse's station, just right down the hallway." Said, "We'll answer your questions for you. We'll help you try to get back to where you understand what's happening and what's going on," which I did. And therefore, the doctor that came to me later, they notified the doctor that was over me at the time, and they contacted her, Dr. Tenorio, and they brought her, and she kind of explained to me what all was happening, because they had to step me down from being in ICU to my own room. So I woke up in my own room. I wasn't in ICU. They had stepped me down from that. And so, and I do remember, speaking of that night of the accident, I remember, because I remember talking to my sister. My sister had to fly up. She lived down in Houston, and she had to fly up. She flew up from Houston up to Springfield to get there to be able to get to the hospital for me. She was by herself. Her husband stayed down in Houston. Mom and Dad drove up from Pine Bluff and stayed up there my entire time that I was in the hospital. They stayed in Branson, and so they stayed there to help me out, to try to help get me back going, all that jazz. And so, but the doctor literally told them, and a couple of folks, I do believe my sister and I think one other person told me, I said, look, I tell you what, we're going to stay optimistically positive because I talked to I just so happens I communicated with a buddy of mine in my old hometown, Mount Bluff. He is actually a medical professional too. He works at Jefferson Regional Hospital. Matt Hosteen, good buddy of mine, and he's professional there, and he knows about the medicine, about the whole thing. He was told the story, and he told me, he said, look, he said he said I was extremely surprised, Lance. He said the fact that you were still alive. He said the kind of injury you had and what happened to you and what you were going through. He said, I'm surprised you actually lived because, and that's what how the doctor felt. Because I went back to him, limping like I am, limping back to him, but talking to him lucidly. And he said he was surprised. He said the fact that you're actually talking to me. He said, Lance, I'm going to tell you, I was thinking one or two things could happen to you, which is almost 100% how it happens. You're either a vegetable for the rest of your life or you pass away. He said those are the two options you have for somebody in your situation. He said that's the reason why I went out to the waiting room area and told folks we're going to stay optimistically positive. He said after all that you'd been through that night and obviously losing me twice that night and having to deal with drilling the holes in my head and trying to do the sensors and my head swelling to the size of a basketball, he said. And of course cleaning the blood up off me because I was cut over my eye and other places like that. And the thing was, I didn't break one bone in my body, not one bone. And I'm like, you know what? I would have rather broken every bone in my body than have that happen. To have brain bleeds like that could mess me up, because that happened, it also messed up my left side because the brain bleeds were especially over the right side of my brain, messed up my left side, which messed up my walking, which is why I have a limp, which is why my arm is not as fluid as my right. And because that happened, me trying to get back into music in Branson was really not a positive thing. I mean, I tried. There's a couple places I tried, but because I wasn't as fluid as I was before and able to play and perform like I had before, obviously, music business is like any business. If you can't do what needs to be done, they're not going to hire you. So I understood that. I talked to the owners of the theaters, and they said, "Well, Lance, look, we think you're doing good, but we need this, and you really can't do this." I understand that. Didn't hurt my feelings because I kind of already saw that beforehand. So, but living through that has been a challenge. Trying to recover somewhat has been a challenge. Lost my license for 2 years because of that. I had to go back to retake my driving test 2 years later. I had to go, the written test and the driving test. I had to do both. So I passed the written test amazingly pretty good. I did driving test pretty good. One of the big things that happened while I was in the hospital though too, speaking of which, was the Friday, because I think this happened on a Tuesday or Wednesday of the week. That Friday, the doctor had gone to my wife at the time and said, Mr. Taylor is not breathing very well. He's still having issues breathing, taking in his own oxygen. We've got him on oxygen, of course, but he's having a difficult time. And they said, well, we may have to do an intubation on his, cut a hole in his throat and then do an intubation, and that way he can have more direct circuit for oxygen. And she goes, no, you can't do that. She goes, if you do that, because he sings, he's a musician, he's a performer, you can't, because that will mess him up. And Doc, they argued back and forth, and Doc says, look, Miss Taylor, this is Friday, we'll give him the weekend. If he's not breathing on his own by 8 o'clock Monday morning, I'm going to do an intubation on him with or without your permission. period. And of course, I had people praying for me in the time. My parents were praying for me. My friends were praying for me. Sister, the whole 9 yards. I had lots of people back at home church praying for me. And because of those prayers, Monday morning at 7 o'clock, I began breathing on my own. So therefore, there was no need for intubation. So forget 8 o'clock. 7 o'clock came. God says, you know what? This is going to happen. This ain't going to happen. This is not going to happen. You're not going to do this to him. So I was breathing on my own. He began to slowly get me out of what happened in the accident, where it took me. And because of that, I'm reminded of a couple of stories in the Bible about that. Somewhat parallel, similar like Job, because number one, there was no question of my faith and who I loved. I loved him. I still love him even more now. And I'm about to cry now. I read Job's story when I was in recovery and doing recovery. My time when I finally got back home, began to do recoveries there. And I remember reading Job's story of how when the enemy, when Satan went before, he had to go before God and said, hey, God said, look, how about my servant Job? He said, there's nobody else like him. Because Job was extremely faithful to Christ. He loved Christ. He said he loved God. He was faithful to him in all things, believed him, he was a just man. And Satan basically said, hey, if you take all this stuff you've blessed away from him, and also basically, wreck his health, he's going to deny you. And God says, you know what? I'll tell you what. You go do what you need to do. Take all his things, and strike his health. He said, but there's one thing you cannot do. You cannot take his life. And when I read that, I said, that's what happened. I said, the enemy wanted to take my life that night twice. And God looked down and he goes, look, I told you could do this stuff to him, but you cannot take his life. There's more I've got for him. No, he's not perfect by any sense of the imagination, but he loves me. I know that. And he's honored me, and because of that, of course I wept like I am now, and I cried like a baby. Just read on that. And that was kind of how my faith was strengthened through all that. Believe it or not, my faith was strengthened through all that. Yes, there were times I've questioned. I've had arguments, literally by myself, not with anybody else in the room. But I argue, just yelling, going, why is this happening? Why did this go on? But again, God reminded me through a story with him and Paul, because Paul asked constantly to remove the thorns from his side, and God didn't. And Paul was wondering why, but God spoke to him. He says, look, you need to rely on me. Basically, you need to rely on me. He said, I'm your strength. He said, that way you don't look to yourself that you are accomplishing, you're thinking you're accomplishing all this. You need to understand that I'm the one that's handling this. I've got you. And, whatever, the Bible never talked about what Paul went through, but Paul was going through some big bad issues. And I'm going to use that. And I love the fact that, I encourage folks, if you read the Word, it will talk to you. The stories, there are tons of stories in there, but those stories talk to you when you read them and not just bro through them. I know tons of, I grew up, obviously when I grew up in Assemblies of God, I grew up going to Sunday school, grew up getting taught all these stories in the Bible. And of course, at that age, I'm not really relating them to anything of what day life is. That stuff didn't come till later in life. I didn't finally realize what God was saying and what God was meaning and the love letter he gave through his word. But obviously with what happened, obviously through what the accident that happened, and me not being able to play anymore in Branson, of course we were doing between our business, start trying to do our business at the house and trying to get our business started, plus the business, me working for a company, out of state company, traveling, doing that stuff, plus doing the shows as well. We were probably bringing about $5,000 a month for the family, and which was actually fairly good. And we were going to try to improve on that. But I went from that to overnight in less than 24 hours, just like that, went from doing the $5,000 a month to disability. But I can only tell you, but God. If it wasn't for his grace, his mercy, and his love for me, I cannot express enough his love and his care for me and what I'm doing, because now, today, I mean, I do sing in church now again, still, Cornerstone. I sing there and I play sometimes. So I can play drums or I can play the piano sometimes. I use my talents because I've been blessed. God blessed me with the talent to grow up, to have those talents as I was young. I felt a calling when I was 12. And, the word says, when he calls you, he will complete it. He said he's not done with me yet. That's all I can tell folks. Hey, he's not done with me yet. Do I know what that entails? No, I don't. Because his thinking is way beyond me, higher than mine by far. Because me, if I can sit here and think and try to think where he's at, my brain hurts. But I am getting back into it. I enjoy it. I love doing it. And it makes me feel like I'm actually accomplishing things when I'm getting back into playing, when I'm getting back into any kind of playing. But I really think when I think about obviously what I went through. Number one, there are worse stories than mine. There are folks that are way worse off than I am. So I'm extremely blessed. I know I'm extremely blessed. My legacy, I don't know. I hope folks remember the kindness, hopefully, that I had. My faith was still solid, even through what happened to me, that I did not deter. I did not turn my eye away from him. I did not back away from him. I did not deny him at all. I've never denied him. I do not deny him at all, period. And I would hope my legacy would also be surrounded in music too, about the music I sang, some of the music I've done, and performances I've done, the praise and worship music I've done, because I love it. I'm hoping that they remember that as part of my legacy. And it's kind of funny because, when I had the praise and worship group, I wrote about half the songs that were on that album. We wrote a lot of them. I wrote myself. My friend of mine wrote, and he and I actually wrote one again together, and we recorded the one song about 1 month before the accident.
Wow.
And I remember that. And it just so happens we were blessed to didn't have to pay for the recording studio, because it was at the church we were at the back of the church, and because the church we were at had a theater, and in the back they had a recording studio, and the guy that ran it was a friend of mine. So he says he does this because he likes doing it, plus he wants to bless folks that want to record songs, so he didn't charge. so he didn't charge us at all. And he put in he plays instruments at the Presley's Theater, so he played some of the instruments he's got on the album itself. Didn't have to pay him to do that, so he just did that because he enjoys that. But love the fact that we that song that we wrote. You know, I've told folks I've never really been so concerned about being paid for a lot of the music that I've done. You know, the praise and worship music I've written and played, I said I want it to minister to people. It is very important. I know lots of people say that, but not only important for life beyond this life on earth, I'm talking about life now. Him and the feeling you have here when you feel him near you, and the peace you have when you have a relationship with him now. Not a religion. I'm not talking about going to church every week, or going to Wednesday night services all the time, or saying the right thing, or doing the Eucharist, or doing your hands the right way, or walking the right way. Has nothing, I promise you, nothing to do with any of that. It's your relationship with Christ, period. It's just like talking to your Heavenly Father. You just talk one-on-one with your best friend. He will listen to you, and he will guide you if you allow him to do that, because he wants the best for you. Even though you don't understand a lot of things, trust me, I don't understand a lot of things. But when I trust him, things turn out the way they need to, for his glory and for me to be blessed in a mighty way. I can tell you that. I can personally tell you that. Even when I question things myself, saying, okay, why don't we go this way? Because we want to interject our own way of doing things instead of letting God do things right the correct way. It's kind of similar to, I use this as a situation when I talk to somebody. I said, look, if you are in a financial situation in this world, and you had all this money to do with something, and you're like, I don't know I know what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this, and one thing, point A, point B. But what if in your group, your financial group you're talking, Charles Schwab or Warren Buffett walk in? Would you want to talk to them? You dadgum right you would. You'd say, hey, what is your opinion? What do you think I should be doing? And if they tell you, if Warren Buffett goes, hey, you need to do this with this money, and this will net you a better gain with this thing. If you use it over here, invest it in here, this will bring you more back. Because you're listening to someone who knows, and you're listening, and you're talking to someone like a best friend. That's all God wants to do. He wants to talk to you like a best friend, because he knows a lot more than we know by a long shot. I explained to many folks, look, if you to view God, say life, if you take the time of life from point A, from beginning to end, and you say, this is God. This is how God sees time. He's outside of time. He sees everything going on in between. He knows the beginning of your life when you were born to the ending of your life. He knows what's happening. The accident that happened to me never took him by surprise. What happened one night, or one evening, and he say, and everybody says, oh, Lance is in this accident, and God didn't say, oops, I didn't see that coming. No. I promise you, he knew what was happening, because he knew what the enemy was after, and what the enemy was going to do, and what the enemy wants to do in your life. And he wants to prevent all that from happening if you let him. That's where that relationship with Christ comes into play. So that I encourage anyone that sees this, hears this, I encourage with all my heart to please invest in a relationship with him, not just a mere church life with him. Because it's the relationship is where you find the depth of it, and where you will feel his presence and his strength. Turn to him. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. He wants you to hand it to him and don't take it back. Just give it to Him.